Thanks for having me. Zero to event level analytics in 30 minutes with the gaming analytics block. My name's Ernesto Ongaro. I'm an enterprise customer engineer here at Looker. So first is, who's this session for? Looker has three user groups, really. There's data modelers or analysts. They know database schemas, they write LookML, and they essentially serve the rest of the company, the data explorers who then take advantage of the models that they made, or simply the consumers of data. So this talk is really focused on that first group of users, a more technical audience, and I'm sort of assuming some knowledge of Looker for this. Little bit about blocks. So blocks are building blocks. You can think of them as accelerators for analytics. There's 6 types of blocks. The gaming analytics block is an analytic block. Sometimes those can be tiny little patterns, or they can be fully built out solutions like the gaming analytics one. What are you going to get? First, you get a model with about 50 different KPIs spanning monetization, retention, acquisition. You'll get some pre-built content, but you're also getting a lot of expertise from the folks who built this. So I built this with a lot of help from some of our gaming clients here in Europe. It's been refined over the last 18 months or so. Finally is, what do you need to bring if you want to do this? So the first thing is we need row level event stream data. So a user connects to your game, starts playing, levels up. That's 3 different events with timestamps, etc. Needs to be stored in the database so that Looker can query it. And really what you need at the other end is data-hungry people. You need people that are asking you for questions about this data all the time, and you're looking for a reliable way to give it to them. That's effectively what Looker and the gaming analytics block can give you. So that's it for the intro. So we start in the blocks directory. I'll click on Analytic Blocks. I'll change industry to gaming and gaming analytics. Okay. So this is what block looks like, and you can read the description there. Let's click See the Code. This will take us to a Git project. And the easiest way for me to do this demo is to click the fork button. So I'll fork this into my own personal account. Forks are public by default. You can't fork something and then make it private. It's just kind of the fastest way to do this demo. So you can do a number of things to get this code set up without having to fork it. So cool. Now I have it under my own sort of Git project, and I'll take this URL. We'll go over to my Looker instance. I'm already in development mode. I've gone to develop, manage LookML projects, and I'll create a new LookML project to house all this. We'll call this gaming. We will start with a blank project, create project. Okay, so we have no LookML, nothing. I'll click configure git. I'll paste that URL that we just got from GitHub. Click continue. Need to deploy a key to be able to read and write. So I'll copy that, go into settings, deploy keys, add a deploy key, and allow write access to it. And we'll test and finalize the setup. So that's sort of my version control for the model sort of set up. Give that a second to initialize. Okay, perfect. So I'll walk you through the sort of structure of the block. First of all, is the README has some helpful information about how the model works. So definitely read through that. There's, of course, the model file. This is how everything hangs together. We need to set the connection. Mine is actually called gaming events already. I'm sure yours would be called something else. That's all you need to change at the moment. We'll come back and talk about some other points. Then you have sort of these folders. The first one is gaming block. So this is the bulk of the block itself. Kind of a lot of the logic lives here, a lot of the measures, a lot of the dimensions. The rest of it is sort of things that we need for setting it up. LookML dashboards, that's sort of our last step because that's the content and how we import that content into your Looker instance. Sessionization, you may or may not need sessionization depending on the state of your data. Sessionization is essentially putting the data into order by user and segmenting that into periods of inactivity. In my case, it's 20 minutes. You'll see that somewhere there we have session timeout set to 20 minutes. Some games prefer to do that for 5 minutes, especially something like hyper casual where people drop the game and then pick it back up quickly. You might want to modify that. Right. And then we have a couple of derived tables. We have a native derived table that creates user facts, and we have a funnel explorer, which is more of like an analytics event, funnel analytics, where you can pick first event, second event, and see how many users kind of dropped off between them. Right. So let's then get started with, right, and you have upstream views as well. The idea here is that you replace this view with your events view. Let's start by doing that. So I will remove this file. It should be called raw events because then we extend it. So I'll delete that and I'll click on create view from table. And this is where I have that event stream, raw events. I'll show you what that looks like just so you have an idea. We'll just select 10 from that table. Okay, so we have a unique event ID, which is like the primary key for that table. Player level's not always filled out. We have the timestamp of when that event occurred. In my case, I actually have two different games, events mixed together. So there's a game name to tell me which game was being played, a version, the user ID. We have user first seen and player session sequence. We actually recalculate that, so you don't necessarily need to have that. Device platform, nice to have, not needed. Brand, model, OS version, language, continent, etc. Where we source the player from is important, whether we got them from organic or where we paid for them on Google Ads. So, you know, this doesn't usually come this nicely. So sometimes you'll have to do obviously some data engineering work to kind of get things in this stage. If it's an acquisition event, what was the campaign? Is this the first time that we've seen that player? So that's effectively what my schema looks like. Yours might be a good bit different. You might have some nested. You probably will have some nested information if you're using BigQuery. But generally, event source data sort of has that shape to it. So we assumed that when we're building the block. Right, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to use that raw events table and create a view. Now mine is conveniently called raw underscore events. If yours isn't, you might want to change that to raw underscore events because later on in the gaming block events, we extend this view. Okay, so we try to maybe keep this sort of as it is because if that schema changes, it's easy enough to just regenerate this file and not necessarily have to, worry about like, where did I make any changes to this? Okay, so that's sorted. We'll click validate lookaml to make sure we're doing okay. You're probably going to have a good few errors at this stage, right? And so the first thing is we need to map a lot of things. I was trying to make this as easy as possible. First, in some other places, we need to know the name of that kind of raw event table. So put that in there. What is the event field? So in my case, it's called event. It's a little bit confusing, but yours might be called event timestamp. Fill that in there. So do that for each one of these. They're pretty self-explanatory. You may not have, let's say that we don't have acquisition cost figured out just yet. You might just hard code like, 3 for that, just for the sake of this. That's going to effectively put the number 3 as acquisition cost for every single player. Okay. What those are being used for is in the events view, in the first few lines here, about 10 lines, those are being sort of added to this field. So you might have in raw events, you'll have something called country, perhaps, or let's say it's going to be called, in your database, it's called region for some reason. Well, what you might want to do is call it country so that all of our dashboards, et cetera, work, and just hide it from your raw events view. That's just to keep things clean in the UI later. Okay. We'll just validate again just to make sure we're doing okay. Again, you're going to get a few errors here that you just have to work through. Oh, that field has been redefined, or, they're pretty helpful. Just validate and then keep working at it. Let's go ahead and just show the Explorer. So I think I need to refresh this. There will be 3 Explorers created. Most basic one is events. This is going to contain everything in your raw file that you brought in, plus everything that's in the block. Some of it's going to be grouped. You'll probably want to come back and, like, for example, this device stuff that came in our raw events, we might come in and say, get a few different cursors going here. We might want to add like a group label of device. What that's going to do is back in our Explorer, it's going to make it easy for people to find anything to do with device. Okay, so I want to look at the device brand, and I want to look at the number of events and maybe number of users. We've added a filter for the last 7 days by default. You can see the generated SQL, nice and clean. Just make sure that runs before we go to the next step. Okay, perfect. So it's sorted by number of events. It looks like Samsung has the most number of events fired and number of users. Let's see. It's a fairly large data set. Samsung as well. And then number 2, Apple. Okay, perfect. So that seems to be working just fine. So the next thing is we want to test maybe sessionization to see how that's going to work. You can maybe use the explore sessions and users. What sessions and users is like a compressed view of your events. So if you've got a ton of sessions and a ton of users, looking at it at the event level might not be very performant. So what this does is it'll condense, it'll create a table which will be 1 row per user and 1 row per session and kind of like join them together. So we'll run that. That's going to take a little time to build in the background, but we just want to make sure that, first of all, persistent derived tables are turned on for your connection. And second of all, that there's no errors in the SQL or anything that prevent this from running correctly. Okay, while that's happening, we can actually start importing Locale. So if we go to all folders, I'll just open that in a new tab. And we go to Locale dashboards. You see that I have 2 dashboards that I can import. I'll click on Daily Pulse. Okay, it looks like we have a few errors coming up in this one, so we'll just check to see what's happening. Best thing to do is just to click Explore from here. Right, so I made a mistake when I said in the manifest file that you can put a quoted 3. 3 is not a string. We actually just want to say 3.0, for example. And that should, if I come back to here, should be able to rerun that. Named 3 not found inside events. So need to sort of initialize that as a string. Right, and I think what's happening there is the way that we have it set up in order to kind of fake that is that we're saying table dot. So it's sort of assuming that I want it from the table. So we'll just make a little tiny change there and hopefully be able to be on our way. Perfect. So that seems to be running. Let's rerun our dashboard here and see if we can get something working. Right, I think we just need to refresh cache here. So refresh this again, it should start working. Okay, brilliant. Wow, everything's working. Perfect. So this main dashboard is kind of the beginning of a lot of things. It's all nicely labeled. Make sure that you agree with our definition of what a lot of this stuff means. Sometimes daily active users are not just people that open the app, but actually do something in them. So a lot of these definitions will have to be adapted to your company, but ultimately, there's a lot done here. If you have the install sources and kind of the campaigns installed, you can like click on any of these fields and get kind of drill downs. There's special drill downs configured at the top. You can actually choose from a set of predetermined drill downs. You'll again want to customize those. At the top of the gaming block, you'll see this sort of drill by parameter, and then it figures out which field to go to based on that drill down. So a lot of things to customize there. But yeah, ultimately, this is a great place to get to if you have the data in this shape. If you don't have all the kind of install cost data, you'll still get daily active users. You'll still get things around retention. We calculate day one retention as like how many users that made it to day two or that made it to day one came back on that day. Day seven, it actually checks to make sure that 7 days have passed. So you can check all that logic to make sure you agree with it, but you'll get retention and you'll get sort of daily active users without your marketing spend. The revenue, of course, super important to be able to get your in-app revenue and your ads revenue in the dashboards. So yeah, from here you can copy from Locale into a folder. So you can put the daily pulse in a shared folder, and that'll actually like not depend on Locale anymore. This dashboard will now be imported, and you'll be able to sort of edit it and do whatever you want with it. If you don't like that chart, you want to make something else bigger, all yours. So yeah, I'd like you to please comment on GitHub. There's issue tracker that you can put issues into. I've closed the ones that have been open, but feel free to kind of talk to me directly through that if you want. And yeah, I'll take some questions now. First one is, what if my data is partitioned by day? There's a new table created per day in BigQuery. Right, so I call that the old way of partitioning, but it's perfectly fine way of doing it. We actually have a little block about partitioning in that way. So what you'll do is you'll replace the table name with like the wildcard name, like an asterisk. And then you'll have to modify the way that we select dates. You'll see that there's a regex expression that translates what the user wants. Hey, I want the last 7 days, I want the last 2 years, into like the match for that wildcard. Okay, is this BigQuery specific? We use Snowflake and some other databases. No, it's not. It's not BigQuery specific. I mean, there will be some code and sessionization and things like that you'll have to adapt to work with another database. There's, that'll just require a little bit more work, and a little bit more adopting. I know that we have a couple of customers who have adopted this to work with Snowflake already. Let's see if we can take one more question. There's a couple there I'll take offline, but does this work with Firebase data? Again, we actually have a block, a Firebase block. It sort of gets the data ready for like using with this block. So kind of think about the Firebase block. Everything's very nested, and what it does is it creates the dimensions and measures in a way that are accessible, and then unnests them on the fly. So think about using that block and then layering this one on top. All right. Well, thanks very much for the opportunity to present and for listening today. Have a very nice day.